Welcome to the Agency Insider Show, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of digital marketing, agency growth, and everything in between. I'm your host, Navneet Kaushal, and today we have a truly special guest with us. She's an expert in SEO, digital marketing strategy, and the psychology behind what people makes click, convert, and engage. She has years of experience blending psychology with SEO to drive real results. Please welcome to the show, Sarah Pokorna.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. So before we dive into the SEO and marketing psychology, let's talk about your journey. How did you transition from traditional marketing into the world of SEO?
Yeah, so it was quite a funny story actually. So I worked in the marketing department at a company about 12 years ago. And they were doing a new website and they hired an SEO agency to, help them out. But I don't know what happened, but basically the SEO agency quit. And my boss at the time, he was like, okay, you're going to do the SEO now. And I had no idea how to do SEO. I knew absolutely nothing. So that kind of started my journey on, I had to learn and I had to learn quick, and basically playing around with that website and learning everything. That's kind of how it all started, really.
Well, that's interesting. Now, how did the psychology comes into the picture here?
Again, bit of a funny story with that one. But when I was in my mid-20s, I decided that, maybe I don't want to work in marketing the rest of my life, and decided that I wanted to be a clinical psychologist, as you do. So I went back to uni to do a degree in psychology. And then kind of halfway through that, I was like, actually, marketing and psychology do have a lot in common. Maybe I could, combine both worlds. And somehow I'm not a clinical psychologist. I'm still in marketing.
Okay. So that's interesting. I'm sure, because I mean, you are the first one who I find with such a unique background. We all started with one or the other accidentally into the SEO. Nobody came into by design, but yes, I mean, your qualifications are quite different.
Yeah, it's funny how that happens. I think the only people who I think decide that they want to be an SEO are like our kids, because I've heard my son say, Mom, I'm going to be an SEO too. I was like, where are you?
More of an AI SEO they're going to be.
Probably.
All right. Now, you also in some of your talks, you mentioned having a crisis of confidence in marketing before returning to study psychology. So is that what you were talking about, the crisis?
Yeah, I would say it was basically, I don't even know how to explain it, but when you work for big corporations, and when you get pretty high up and you don't really have anywhere higher to go, you realize, you sit back and think, oh my gosh, like, am I going to spend the rest of my life, working my butt off so that I can make bigger companies even more money? And not, it's not the most rewarding thing in the world. So I was like, I can't really see myself doing this until I retire. So I'd prefer to do something more rewarding, and maybe, as I said, do clinical psychology or something, for me, that I'm passionate about. But now that takes, like, in Ireland, it takes at least 6 years to become a clinical psychologist, and you have to do lots of unpaid work in order to do it. And like, as a mom and the only breadwinner in the house, I don't have the resources to, quit my job and work for free. So I had to rethink a little bit. But yeah, no, I'm quite happy with the path I ended up on.
Okay. And so how has your background in psychology influences your approach to SEO and digital marketing strategies?
I think quite a lot. I think it's probably one of the main things that I think about when it comes to strategies and stuff like that, because at the end of the day, the people that you need to, I don't want to say manipulate, but the people that you need to get to do what you want are people, and they all think in the same irrational kind of way. So you really have to understand what is going on inside their brains in order to get them to do what you want and make conversions and come to your website and, buy your products and everything. So I try to use psychology at kind of every single stage, even if it's, just thinking about the layout, thinking about UX, thinking about, what words to use on a page, how to phrase even things like titles, descriptions, everything comes into it. Yeah.
Okay. And you are now the co-founder of Neurodivergence in SEO. So
Yeah.
can you tell us more about this initiative and what all is it?
Yeah, so it's basically a group, a community group for people who identify as neurodivergent, who work in SEO. And there are quite a lot of neurodivergent marketers out there. I'd say, the majority of us almost are. But I set up the group with the co-founder Jack, because we realized that, there wasn't really anywhere for people like us with ADHD or autism or, all of the different conditions, to actually just, have a safe space and be ourselves and, talk about the problems that we face in the workplace, because it's not easy sometimes. So we founded that, and it just kind of went from there. It became really popular really quickly. So I'm thrilled that, we've been able to have, hundreds of members from all around the world join and just, meet each other.
Okay. That's a good initiative, actually. We never heard that there would a group like that. So yes, hats off to you. Now, so let's talk a little bit more about the psychology of SEO. You have often, in fact, in one of your interviews, you talked about psychomarketing and how it differs from neuromarketing. So Can you break it down for our listeners?
Yeah, so lots of people have heard of neuromarketing, and people assume that because it's got the word neuro in it, it's kind of like marketing psychology. There's quite a big difference between the two, because neuromarketing uses things like, neuroimaging techniques and stuff to actually research, how people react to different things. You can use MRI scans, you can, actually study people's brains and stuff, whereas psychomarketing is more the actual psychology theories that you use rather than, actual equipment. I would say that's probably the easiest way to put it, or to imagine it. Because in psychomarketing, we use things like social psychology and understanding how groups of people behave, and basically adapt those sort of things to SEO.
Okay, you also spoken about cognitive biases and how they influence user behavior. So can you share some real world examples of how marketers can leverage biases like negative bias or confirmation bias in SEO?
Yeah, basically everybody has their own biases. As much as you like to think that you don't, everybody is biased, even no matter how much you understand it. There's hundreds of, cognitive biases out there, but you can use these sometimes to your advantage. Some of them, like confirmation bias, I think you just really need to kind of understand how it works rather than hacking it per se. Whereas you can use things like availability bias to make sure that, in e-shops when they're like, oh, come on, you need to go and get this because there's only 2 left or something like that. You can play on people's, I wouldn't say feelings, but on those sort of biases. Confirmation bias is a bit of a difficult one because I would say it's more problematic. It's where people, basically people don't want to, sorry, can I start again? It's basically where people don't like information that doesn't confirm their existing beliefs. So people go out of their way to find information that actually backs up their opinion, even if their opinion is wrong. So I did some research with the BBC on this about the kind of things that people are searching for around the US elections. And we found that because of the way Google works, Google is so intent on giving people the information, the right answer for what they're searching for. What they're doing is instead of like feeding people, correct content, they're actually giving people the answers to the questions that they want. And therefore, when it comes to things like elections and people making, an informed decision on what they want to do, what actions they want to take, if somebody's, a good choice or a bad choice, it makes it very difficult to get that information kind of off Google. So I think it's something that SEOs need to be aware of, because at the end of the day, we are the ones who are optimizing for different search terms. And if we're optimizing for things that actually could be construed as misinformation, fake news, that kind of thing, you know, I think we do have a bit of a moral obligation to do it properly rather than optimizing just because we want to rank for that keyword, if that makes sense.
Yeah, right. Now, you also highlighted how people with different mindsets, fixed versus growth, respond differently to marketing messages. Now,
Yes.
how should brand tailor their content for these different mindsets?
Yeah, I think what you need to do at the beginning is find out kind of who your target audience are from kind of like a psychographic perspective. So it's like demographics, but quality. Different brands kind of attract different types of people. So you've got luxury brands, and they're very, very, targeted towards fixed mindset people, because fixed mindset people tend to use, things, belongings, as kind of like a status symbol. And they want to show off that they belong to part of a group. And, for example, if you take a BMW as a car, so they want to show that they're part of a group. They want to, identify as that. They want to show off that they've got status. Whereas people with a growth mindset are less concerned about kind of things like luxury goods, and they're willing to put the work in to actually, improve their skills rather than buying something that makes it look like they're already at the top of the game, if that makes sense. So you've got things, for example, like Duolingo. That would be a very good way of marketing to, for example, growth mindset people, and having content and campaigns that are geared up for, if you put the work in, you'll be able to achieve X, Y, Z. Whereas you've got your luxury brands where it is, if you buy our product, people will think you are X, Y, Z, and you would have made it because of our product.
Okay, now SEO is often seen as technical, keywords, backlink, algorithm, but you emphasize psychology role in ranking and conversions. Why do you think most SEO overlooks this aspect?
I see this as a massive problem within the industry, because most people, as you said, most people tend to think about, technical stuff. They tend to, think, even when it comes to content, that, content, you just write some words, choose some keywords, and that's it. Whereas it's great, ranking, it's great putting content on a page, but if people actually don't convert and people don't get what they want, what's the point in doing it? At the end of the day, I think we have a bit of a problem in the industry that we rely too much on a lot of bullshit metrics. So we measure lots of different things that actually don't really make you successful, or don't make the company successful. Whereas at the end of the day, business owners, people are actually paying for the SEO. They want sales, they want conversions, they want people. They don't really care about things like average position, or if your keywords have gone up by one place, or something. So yeah, understanding why people do what they do, it can really help take your campaigns to the next level.
Okay, now just so how psychological principles influence consumer decision making in digital marketing?
That is a massive question, because there are so many different ways depending on how you want to look at it. One of my favorite psychological theories is social identity theory. And that basically means that people have their own social identities, and they identify as part of a group. And being part of that group gives them a sense of worth. And if somebody is different from them, from that group, makes people feel uncomfortable. And using this, you can understand why people want to belong to parts of groups, why people want to, use your products to belong part of this, fit in, be part of this group, get their sense of self-worth. And if you can kind of use theories like this, you're able to understand what motivates people, what gets people to buy, and how you can actually implement that into your strategies, in your content, in your plans, just to kind of like I don't like to use the word hacking, but hack what they're thinking, basically.
Okay. Now, you also mentioned a bit about dark psychology. So, what is dark psychology in marketing, and how do brands intentionally or unintentionally use it?
Okay, so this is something that brands intentionally use. You don't like to think it's there, but it's there, unfortunately, and the biggest brands out there do it. So a lot of the big brands, use consumer psychologists, and I think the best one to explain is probably if you've heard of the Cambridge Analytica scandal, where basically the company was accused of basically targeting people and swaying elections using the type of messaging that they use. So when you go onto things like social media, you often see things like quizzes that are like, oh, what's your type of Disney princess? And so on. Well, those quizzes are actually based on personality quizzes that we use in psychology to determine people's personality types. And using that, they can paint a picture of if you come underweight, if you score higher on things like neuroticism, if you're more open to experiences, that kind of thing. And using the other data that you have, they can use this to build a profile of, maybe photo profiles and stuff like that. And then once they've got this information about you, and once they've kind of sold your data on to whoever's buying, marketers can then use this data to come up with really, really highly targeted campaigns that literally play on people's weaknesses. So, for example, like in the case of elections, you had, for example, people or marketers creating campaigns that specifically, targeted people's fears of immigration, and basically just try to divide people that way. So you really do have to be careful, because whenever you do these little like quizzes and stuff, they get access to the whole of your data, they get access to, your personality type. And then that can be used against you. So yeah, dark psychology is kind of scary. It's fascinating. But yeah, just know that it's there.
And there is also something called as manipulative marketing tactics, right? So what would be the examples, and what there could be an impact on consumer trust for those?
Oh, there's so many different things that people can use to kind of manipulate buyers into buying stuff, and you see it all the time. I think it's something that, you kind of have to be aware of in order to see it. I know that I'm allergic to different advertisements, and, I hardly use social media because I can't actually look at it, because I'm like, I know what they're doing. And, they're trying to sell me this by using this technique, by trying to, instill fear of the unknown in me or something like that. So yeah, again, not something that you can easily go through and talk about all the different techniques, but if you see kind of all of these scare tactics and stuff like that, those are marketers, doing their job, probably not in the most moral way.
Okay. Now let's talk about a little bit about user-centric SEO versus vanity metrics. So in one of your recent YouTube podcasts, you mentioned how brand focuses too much on vanity metrics and automation instead of user experience. Now, why do you think this happens, and how can marketers shift their focus?
I think it happens for a number of reasons. So I used to work for an SEO tool, and something that I realized there is that in the SEO tool world, a lot of tools kind of sell metrics that are actually not useful at all, but people think that they want them, so they give it to people. And that's one of the reasons, like, I don't think it helps. I think people rely too much on, metrics from tools, like when I worked in international SEO, people would say, I have an 80% international SEO score, I'm doing amazing. I was like, but your pages aren't indexed on Baidu, so actually you're getting 0. So people being fed the wrong metrics, and, wrong metrics being created just to sell tools. And I think as well, unfortunately, in the SEO world, we all know this, that there are some SEOs who are better than others. And I think like SEO buyers love a good buzzword. And a lot of people rely on these buzzwords to sell their services and try and justify, the spend or the results that they're getting, when actually they're not really getting any meaningful results. That anybody who's worth their, anyone who's a good SEO will know how to report on these metrics, and make them meaningful, rather than just some surface level stuff that doesn't make any difference.
Right. Now, with Google increasingly emphasizing on helpful content and of course user first experience, what are some of the strategies agency can use to align their SEO efforts with the real user intent?
Fact checking. This is something that is not done nearly enough. So like we hear people talking about fact checking, helpful content. We hear people talking about you have to have expertise and everything, but actually behind the scenes, people are just, they're giving the content to writers who don't know, for example, psychology. It would be like giving me something to write on, brain surgery or phishing or something that I have no idea about, just because I'm a content writer. So like, I really think that we have a big problem that, it can't be helpful, it can't be correct if it's not correct. And studies have shown that, for example, out of, over 2 billion pages of medical content on the internet, over 60% is incorrect. And that stuff is out there giving people information. So yeah, it may, meet all of Google's EEAT guidelines, but you need to think of the dangers of people actually following that advice. And there have been people who have actually, died in one case where a woman killed her parents by accident by giving them the wrong medication because they followed advice online. And the information was incorrect, but, it ranked highly on Google.
Okay. And first step to making their strategy more user-centric.
I'm sorry, can you repeat it? Froze for a minute.
Yeah, sure. So if an agency is too reliant on an automation and technical SEO, what's the first step to making their strategy more user-centric?
I think the first place that I like to start is audits. And I think when it comes to audits, you need to take a deeper look than just the technical side of things. You need to look at the content, you need to look at analytics, you need to use data to find out, what's working, what's not working. If you have a page that's ranking really well but not converting, why is that? You need to speak to users. You need to speak to your target audience as well to find out, why they don't like pages. And something that stuck with me from my international SEO days is you need to look at localization. You need to make sure that, is it suitable for the target country? Is the language okay? Is it, could the translation be too bad? Could it just not be culturally relevant? You need to look at all of these different things in order to work. Because something that I see a lot is that people go out with the same content, for example, for the UK and Ireland. We're two different countries. We have two different cultures. And I've often told companies, do not have a UK phone number if you're trying to sell your office or get people to call your office in Dublin. People are not going to do it. So it's little things like that. And even just tiny different words that we use, make a big difference.
Okay. Now, you talk a little bit about international SEO. So in you were recently working with Dragon Metrics, right?
Yes.
So in your past experience as Dragon Metrics, what are some common misconceptions about international SEO that you have encountered?
Oh gosh, there are so many. I could be here forever. I think the biggest misconception is that people tend to think, oh, I'm just going to translate my website and it'll be grand. Whereas most people spend thousands on strategies in the home market and then think if they translate some of the blog posts into a different language, their SEO is going to be ranking in a different country. That's not going to happen. They need to do a strategy. They need to do competitor analysis. They need to put the same amount of work into the SEO in different countries than they do as they do in the home market, because different markets have different preferences. So in Japan, for example, you need to have comparison articles a lot of people in Europe feel uncomfortable about that because they're like, why would I mention my competitors on my blog? But, that's what Japanese people want. That's what they're used to. You need to create those sort of things. You need to look if, are your products even suitable to sell? Like a silly little thing here is we have Tesco's and I live in the Czech Republic, and bedding is always on sale here because nobody buys it because we have different pillowcase sizes to what they do in the UK. So nobody buys it because we can't put it on our pillows. And yeah, there are just so many little things that people often forget. And, even different search engines, people forget that, you don't want to optimize for Google in China. People also often forget about, indexing. So I've seen people spend thousands and thousands on having a new Chinese website made and translating all of their content, but none of it was indexed on Baidu because they didn't have any of the, requirements for China.
Okay, now you also discussed about the importance of understanding cultural identity in marketing campaigns. So can you share an example of how this knowledge can make or break a campaign?
Yeah, so sometimes it takes just a little thing to kind of become a cultural faux pas. I can give you one example in Northern Ireland from the company Orange. So lots of people know the company Orange, especially in different places in the UK, and their slogan is "The future's bright, the future's orange." That advertising campaign came out in 1997 or something like that, and it's still a running joke today because to Northern Irish ears, it means the future's bright, the future's Protestant. And anyone who's aware of the situation in Northern Ireland will realise that, that's probably not a good look to go for if you don't want to alienate half the population. So even things like colours can offend people or make your brand look like they haven't done the research at all. And even, I've had people reach out and say, I want to do XYZ in the Czech Republic and Poland. Can you help me do it? And I was like, yeah, but people don't buy ride-on lawnmowers because most people in Prague live in flats. So nobody's going to have a ride-on lawnmower in their flat. And they're like, oh, but I wanted to sell to, the average Prague person. I was like, no, not going to happen. So, speaking to somebody in that country rather than going ahead and just doing it, please do it.
Okay, you also pointed out that Google algorithms sometimes fuel misinformation due to confirmation bias. How big of a problem do you think this is, and should SEO take responsibility for combating it?
So I think it's really hard for SEOs to take responsibility because at the end of the day, it's not just SEO's problems. We're the ones who have kind of just been thrown in the deep end. When it comes to confirmation bias, it's a big problem. With the research that I did, it was actually pretty scary, the different types of results that you got depending on if you put in, for example, is Donald Trump a good president or is Donald Trump a bad president? And it would serve you completely, different stuff. Now, Google's argument is they can't be, politically biased, which is completely fair, completely understand that. But when you've got, for example, search terms, some of the search terms that we saw were actually, fueled off misinformation. And, people's, for example, conspiracy theory blogs were right at the top of the search results. And that could lead to people going down a rabbit hole. People will share this. Again, this all comes down to social identity theory and people sharing these because people have been proven to share misinformation just because it gives them a sense of self-worth and they want to fit in with their friends. So it's kind of worrying that, search engines are not doing more about this or don't seem to have a big understanding of this, because whenever I try to speak to people about it, they're like, confirmation what? So it's a big problem. I think as SEOs, we should be aware of it so that when it comes to, optimizing keywords, I know loads of people, for example, like automate keyword research and then just decide to write AI articles on loads of different things. You do need to go through and think, is this a good idea? Is this going to hurt my client's brand? Am I going to fuel misinformation with this? So yeah, just be really careful. And I always say, don't be a dick when it comes to optimizing. because there are just some things you shouldn't do. So don't do it.
Okay. Now, AI generated content is exploding right now. And of course, Google is fighting against it as well. How do you see AI fitting into SEO, and what are the ethical concerns around AI generated misinformation?
Yeah, I think AI has a lot of potential. I'll be honest with you, because there's lots of stuff that we do in SEO that is extremely tedious, and we can automate and we can improve things. And there are some, when I worked at Dragonmetrics, we worked on a new content writer that we developed, and testing the AI and getting that to work really well was something that I really enjoyed, and I can see the potential in it. However, we need to remember that AI is inherently biased, that there's a number of different reasons for this. So, for example, most of the training data is Western. So, for example, even, in Slavic countries, we are not represented, and it just gets worse and worse depending if different places in Asia, Africa, or somewhere it's very kind of white, Western, that kind of thing. Also, linguistically, there is not enough training data, or AI is not very well trained in different languages, especially languages with, countries with smaller populations. So again, that's an issue. You can't rely on it to, create content in every single language. You've also got as well that, the data that it's been trained on can be racist. It can be biased.
Right.
You can get some pretty disgusting stuff off AI. So again, before you go and roll out AI, especially in languages that you don't understand, make sure that you check it, because otherwise, it won't end well.
Okay, and so you also mentioned the concept of psychomarketing in your talks. How does this differ from traditional marketing approaches, and how can agencies incorporate it?
I think to be honest, like, psychology and marketing should be part of marketing, basically. And if you go back in time to kind of, like the days of things like Mad Men or Ogilvy, they use a lot of those concepts. And I think as marketers, we've kind of lost our way in the digital age a bit, because we're forgetting all of these, marketing techniques. We're just relying too much on AI, whereas I think SEOs of the future, especially now with AI coming in, you need to understand digital marketing, or marketing as a whole. You need to understand the different techniques if you want to survive over the next few years. Sorry, that probably comes across as really harsh. Yeah. So I think the best way to start is just by being open to it. A lot of people are not open to it. A lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to, do my technical SEO, and who cares about psychology? I deal with that a lot, and I'm often explaining all the time, well, actually, this is why it's helpful. But I think you do need somebody who actually kind of understands psychology and has actual proper qualifications in psychology, because there is an awful lot of rubbish on LinkedIn, on the internet, people writing books about people claiming that XYZ is psychology, when actually, it's not backed up by science. So if you're going to do anything, research papers, study, reputable sources, use books by people who, for example, have PhDs in psychology and that sort of thing.
Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about the future of SEO, of course, which every year looks uncertain to everyone. But yes, here we are again doing SEO as usual. Now, in your opinion, what are the most significant challenges facing SEO professionals in 2025?
I think there's a couple. I think AI is going to be a challenge, because, of course, the more that AI takes over, the less we need to do, and because of the reasons that I've already explained earlier, we need to do different. We need to make sure that we're harnessing AI in the correct way. I think as well with the market at the moment, that loads of companies are making people redundant. There's loads of cuts everywhere, and unfortunately, SEO is always the first, and marketing is always the first one to go. So I think what we need to do as well, reskill as SEOs, learn how to do traditional digital marketing, learn how to do traditional marketing, because that is going to give you a competitive edge when it comes to your skill set. And, moving into a more digital marketing role rather than focusing purely on SEO is probably one of the best decisions I've made. So I can recommend it. And then again, I think just, I think that's probably it.
Now, how do you see the integration of psychology and SEO evolving in the future?
I think it's going to go one of two ways. I think there's always going to be the haters who are more technically minded, are just going to think, nope, this is a load of rubbish. But I do hope the more that I speak about it and the more other people start, realizing that it works and getting results, I think people are going to start, coming around to the idea that maybe this is something that we should be doing in the industry. But again, it's really early days and it's not very well represented. So hopefully things will change.
Right. Now, what advice would you give to the agencies looking to stay ahead of the curve in terms of SEO strategies and tools?
Don't think purely technical. Think about the things that we've talked about in this podcast today, and don't be afraid to reach out for help, because, you can't be a master of everything. You can't get a psychology degree in a week or just by reading a book. There are people out there like myself who can help. So make the most of it and just be open-minded.
Okay. And for our listeners who are new to marketing psychology, what are some must-read book or resources you recommend?
So I always recommend Google Scholar. I know it's really nerdy. I know it's not really most people's idea of light, fun reading. But if you go straight to the source of the actual studies, you'll be able to find out, what works, what doesn't work by reading up how these studies went. That's basically everywhere that I go. And when I'm preparing for talks and stuff, I normally read about that many research papers, like 20, 30, 50 research papers. And then you can really, really get a good understanding, and it will give you ideas of other topics to dive into and stuff like that. So yeah, go there.
What are some quick wins SEO and marketers can implement today to apply psychology in their campaigns?
Yeah, I think this is where, for example, like e-commerce SEO is really good for implementing psychology. So take a look at some of the big e-shops. So for example, Sephora is really big in Europe at the moment. So you can see what they do is when you put a product in the basket, they recommend other products and stuff like that. Following those little things, take a look at some of the different cognitive biases that you have. Again, I have some of these, I have these in slides that I've done, which you can find on my LinkedIn. And you get examples of even things like how to put pricing. So Apple does this really well. For example, instead of putting, the most expensive iPhone first, they always put the cheaper iPhone first. They basically order their pricing so that when people take a look at the pricing, they're not like, oh my God, this is expensive, I'm not going to spend, So yeah, basically what they do is they're careful with their pricing so that when people look at the most expensive pricing first, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to spend that much money on a, on a phone. And then by the time they get to the, mid-range phones, they're like, actually, this isn't too bad. I think I'll buy a mid-range phone. So instead of going from buying the cheapest, they've actually gone up.
Right, to the second most expensive.
Exactly, because it seems like a good deal compared to the most expensive one that people saw first.
Right. Okay, now you are also a musician, right?
Yep.
Okay. So how does your passion for music influence your approach to marketing and creativity?
Oh gosh. I think just being a creative person kind of helps because it allows you to think outside the box and, see things potentially a different way. Like, I'll be honest, traditional Irish fiddle playing has nothing to do with marketing whatsoever. But good content for LinkedIn. No, I'm kidding. But no, I think just being creative, marketing is creative. Creative content is creating content is creative. Coming out with different campaigns is creative. And if you have that sort of, creativity, it really helps.
Now, what's one book that has significantly impacted your professional life?
I would say probably one of the first books that I've read is one that stood with me, and that's Confessions of an Advertising Man by David Ogilvy. Just because it was, it's so different to what we do today of, getting an AI to write an article for us. It, explains how the thought process behind coming up with these taglines, because they only had like a couple of sentences to make a real impact. And being able to write stuff like that, it takes skill and thought.
Okay, if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self just starting in the industry, what would it be?
Don't do it. No, I'm kidding. No, I think what I would do is tell myself probably about imposter syndrome, because I remember it's only just recently I've stopped worrying so much about imposter syndrome, because, you see we have a lot of celebrities in this industry. You see a lot of people sharing their thoughts on LinkedIn. You see, loads of carousels that maybe aren't quite correct with different pieces of advice. And when you're early in your career and you're not very confident, it does make you doubt yourself a little bit, especially when people on LinkedIn write, mean comments because they don't agree with the way that you've done stuff, even though, it may be correct. So I think, find yourself people who support you, and try not to let any of that noise, put you off doing what you do. And you're always going to get a mean person, no matter what industry you're in, but just try not to take it personally. And, you'll make it, you'll get there.
Okay, so we now move to the final part of the show, which is called as rapid fire round.
Oh, gosh.
And it's normal. So, yeah.
Yes, I can.
So you will answer whatever first comes in your mind.
Okay. Sounds dangerous.
So, what is your favorite SEO tool?
Dragonmetrics.
Okay. And after that?
Sitebulb.
All right. Most overrated SEO tactic?
Overrated. Just adding keywords into a piece of content and hoping for the best.
Your go-to productivity hack?
Break things down into shorter, batches so that you don't get bored.
Okay. One SEO myth you would like to debunk?
My God, there's so many of them. The international SEO is just about translating some keywords on some landing pages, and you're good to go. It's not.
Okay. So with that, we come to the end of the show. And Sarah, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Agency Insider Show. Your insights into the interactions of psychology and SEO are truly fascinating, of course. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you would like to share with our listeners? Perhaps any upcoming project or where they can follow your work?
Yeah, so I'm mainly active on LinkedIn. So if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, do feel free. Next conference I'm going to be at is the SEO Mastery Summit in Vietnam, in Saigon. And I'm going to be doing a masterclass on dark psychology.
That's bad conference, right?
It's gonna be something very different to what you'd find at traditional SEO events. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Right. Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. And to our listeners, don't forget to subscribe to the Agency Insider Show for more insightful conversations with industry leaders. Until next time, this is Navneet Kaushal signing off. And Sarah, once again, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.